What is up, guys? It's your boy Aniki, and today we're discussing the latest My Hero Academia chapter. We're gonna dive right into this, and let's start from the beginning, where we get the revelation that Kodagiri is, at his core, more than likely Shirakumo's corpse, and we get the exposition, or rather, an expounding upon the fact that Nomu are more than likely all derived from either people who already died or people who were killed in the experimentation process. Now, the thing that makes this kind of interesting is that All for One is essentially admitting to having access to UA's morgue, or in general having access to the morgues around the country, which lines up with the doctor Ujiko having access to Tartarus already. It's very likely that some of these people are actually prisoners who either get put on death row or they get kidnapped in general, disappeared, and that's how this happens. But what that also does do is open the room for Ujiko to maybe not be the most evil person in the series for turning his nephew into a Nomu, but instead it could be that his nephew had already died in some kind of villain-related attack, and he just happened to use the corpse because, hey, at the end of the day, it's a dead body. Alright, that's still kind of messed up, but perspective. Maybe he didn't kidnap and force his own, grandson into being a Nomu. Just saying. Maybe he was already dead. One of the things that I like about this, though, is that we kind of get one, Present Mike being serious. Yeah, he's kind of like, his reactions are kind of gag-like, but they're still very grounded in the sense that his exasperations go along with the eccentricities already established within his personality, and not that some ham-fisted gag just to be done within the moment. And we get kind of proof of the whole where Shirakumo's corpse and his personality comes into play, because for those of you who've read the backstory of Aizawa, you know about how he saw a cat, was going to leave it with an umbrella because he couldn't take it with him to actually take care of it, and then Shirakumo ends up grabbing it on the way to school anyway and bringing it to them. So, and one of the things he directly says is, I couldn't leave him alone, and so the same way that Shirakumo's kindness and general sensibility towards vulnerable people, or in the sense, Shigaraki would be vulnerable mentally towards All for One and his own quirk, but rather the idea that Shirakumo still lives on, that he always wants to protect people that are younger or smaller than him, and overall has a nurturing personality. So that has carried through. That part of Kurogiri is not programming, but rather his natural instinct. This does, however, make Kurogiri come into question, like what kind of Nomu he's classified as. He could be classified as a high-end from the standpoint of he is the most intelligent Nomu we've seen so far, but he also might just be a mid-grade because he doesn't, at the end of the day, have a bunch of combat ability, nor does his quirk seem to be a bunch of quirks, but rather a couple of quirks mashed all together to form essentially like one or two, being like the black mist quirk, where part of his body is always black mist and he can use that to teleport. In addition to that, the fact that Shirakumo's head was heavily damaged is also probably a good part of why Kurogiri's head is now just mist, as we see that even when Eraser tries to erase the quirk, it is still active enough that it is actually what his face is made out of now. So one of the things that Eraser says, though, that people loved and reacted to very quickly online is that he said, are you expecting some power, essentially the power of friendship to save the day? And even in the viz, yes, he even says, let's see here, I'll pull it up real quick. Let's see, he said it before, what are we gonna do? He wants to take him on a trip down to Merlane. Oh, see, look at that. Were you hoping for some miracle through the bonds of friendship is the official Viz translation. Sounds like you've been watching too many movies. So that is Horikoshi kind of calling out the fact that that typical trope isn't supposed to just solve every single problem. And in this case, though, it is the one time or where it would actually be somewhat justifiable, but at the same time, we know that his brain would have been damaged, and while his core templated personality seemed to be there due to his previous interactions with Eraserhead and President Mike, it's very unlikely that any of Shirakumo's actual memories are there. So what this comes down to now is whether or not this is going to be like the Get Out situation, where beyond this programming, there's like a sunken place where the psyche can kind of be awoken again, and that person can take control at least for a little while and maybe divulge some information. If that's the case, then that's one way to go about finally having information be exchanged. The fact that Shirakumo technically had been the UA, but then we also have to talk about the fact that if this is really the situation, then maybe the traitor, who the traitor is, really opens up kind of wide, because anybody who knew who Shirakumo was could potentially be teleported over there. And then if you think back to it, it was stated that it's a shame that one of them turned a villain, and people look at that at midnight saying that as foreshadowing for Kodagiri actually being a Nomu and converted over and literally turned into a villain. But then you could also argue that maybe she knew literally that was Shirakumo who had been turned into a villain, and potentially speculate that the UA traitor this entire time has been Midnight, though that does seem like a bit of a stretch. It is something that within the context of the narrative, if you're including those lines as clues for foreshadowing, could also lead to other solutions to previous mysteries within the story. That's not a theory that I'm necessarily batting for, by the way. I'm just simply pointing out that it is a viable, functioning possibility within the storyline. We find out that Hood Chain was based off of an underground fighter. At least we know that they didn't get a hold of Rappa. That's what's important to me about this. And then we know that this isn't Muscular. So we know Muscular is still in prison, which means he can still be used later. I assume that Horikoshi made it a point to distinguish between the two of them for this purpose. But then also, I assume he's going to keep Muscular around because he's considered a high-value piece, according to Overhaul. And then that gives Shigaraki, somebody else loyal to him, more devout to him, because he got them freedom. So that's part of where I think that direction is going. We also finally get the explanation for Aizawa. This is like all Aizawa. There were some funky spoilers floating around that claimed we were going to see some of their presentations from class 1A, but this is all about Aizawa. We even see some of the students from 2A finally, which is the first time in the series we've actually gotten any focus on the second years. And it's just brief, but we get the explanation that what Aizawa has been doing over the past years is having the ability to expel and re-enroll people, so that by killing their careers, killing their hopes, they can realize how serious, and like the idea of never getting to be a hero again, a death of their dreams, so that, so to speak, so that they could understand what they're really fighting and training and working towards, which means something must have happened as far as an exercise or something that probably was them not taking it very seriously towards what could have been the potential for somebody to die, and that could have been what led to Aizawa expelling them all and then letting them all re-enroll so that they could get it together. The girl seems to have, that we see especially, seems to think that it overall was for their benefit, though people talking about how ultimately the black mark on their record is something that they would have preferred not to have acquired. Again, they could have always just been better hero candidates, though. And especially as we see that anything Aizawa would have done, he is genuinely a rational person, so it would have been derived from something behavioral they had displayed that meant that they needed very strong course correcting in order for it to be rectified. Now, that does not necessarily mean that 100% the expulsion was justified, but it does mean that what Aizawa did was more than likely, was definitively structured around the idea of making them better heroes and students, but also making sure they understood the consequences and gravity of loss in the hero world, which is something that is really hard to teach from a classroom. And you don't necessarily want them to go out there and find that out and have that lesson be learned, on their first mission, but through the death of a classmate or another student. And I think that's what Eraserhead has been going for this entire time. Very reminiscent of Kiritsugu Emiya in a way, in which you talk about some of the bodies and things that he's done, only for them to be recontextualized in a far better light. The idea towards the end of the chapter we finally get is that everything that Aizawa has been doing has been to try to protect people and carry on Shirakumo's will and make sure that nobody experiences the loss that he has had, and in the sense that he's never really been over it, which is also alluded to by the taking care of a gloomy brat seems like a tough job line, in which case Yamada thinks about the fact that he spends all his time around gloomy ass Aizawa, and that was what Shirakumo was kind of doing too, to look out for him. But we finally see that the person who wants the power of friendship to come through more than anything is Aizawa, with the final words of the chapter being the three of us can still be heroes together. But ultimately, I think part of Shirakumo is in there, And the reason for that is because when you read it over and he says, he starts talking about the cat, Kurogiri immediately looks away. And he stays looking away the entire time. Up until, like, even, I don't think he turns around to look at Aizawa again until we finally see Aizawa crying and taking off the goggles. We don't actually see Kurogiri looking at him again, able to face him. So there could be some of those feelings stored away within the subconscious, pulling away, making Kurogiri start to feel like a little guilty without him knowing why. And while I don't think Horikoshi would allow the brainwashing to be undone within the context of these next couple of chapters, I do think we can set the groundwork for Shirakumo to possibly start to resurface, maybe through nightmares or something else down the road in the story. Mostly because Horikoshi has done a pretty consistent job of not letting people's mental anguish or agonies get solved within, 1 or 2 chapters really quickly. So, yeah. That's all I really have to say this week. This was very quick, very informative. What it really did was contextualize the Nomu for us and give us a better explanation of what's going on. Everything else that is covered within this, I could dive into more, but it would be more appropriate if I were doing like a video that was specifically about Aizawa. At that point, it would be like, chapter discussion with a little bit of chapter discussion with mostly focus on like who Aizawa is as a person. That's something that I can work on at a later date, which I have other videos that I need to also get done before then. So you guys have a wonderful day. This has been My Hero Academia Deconstruction. I will be uploading at least one more video along with this one today. You guys have a wonderful day. Anaki.